serger on the right. Lift up your presser foot. And when you serge, you want to be sure to leave a tail. So I'm going to line up my fabric here. And get my presser foot. And I'm trying not to cut very much fabric off. And when I say leave a tail, just sew off, trim your fabric, trim your other tail, and you're going to empty your little serger tray at the end, and then you can either pick it up or put it under, reset it. You have to separately serge each side. Okay, and once again, leave a tail. And we're going to go back to the sewing machine because I'm going to pretend that I have serged all 8 sides of my fabric. So I've got all 4 sides serged and all 4 sides serged, and now we're going to go to sew. I'm going to cut this off. And let's just go to the sewing machine. I'll come back. And I think you just cut that little piece out of it. Okay, and now you're going to, I've got my sewing machine already threaded, and I have my stitch length on 3. I'm going to put the pretty sides of my fabric together. And I'm going to put a pin to hold it in place.
Everything about my pose just makes everything about my pose. Okay,
a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to line up my fabric on the end. I'm going to sew a few stitches. And then I'm going to back stitch. And I'm going to take my pins out before I get to them. And I'm going to sew all the way off. And I'm going to back stitch. So I back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. And trim your threads, and then I'm going to fold my fabric up a 1/2 inch and then 2 inches. So I want to press my seam open, and I think I have one. So you'll need to use a hem gauge, and we're going to go to the ironing board. So I'm going to press my seam open. And I'm going to take a hem gauge, and I'm going to go to a 1/2 inch with my hem gauge. I'm going to pin it a 1/2 inch and pin it a 1/2 inch and pin it a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to press that up toward the back. Okay, so I've pressed it up a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to mark 2 inches, or pin 2 inches. And I'm going to press this up. And I'm trying, like my pins have a little ball. And I'm trying to not iron that ball because sometimes that ball will melt. So I can take it out. And then I'm going to move my pins to, I'm going to pin my seam. Pin one edge in place. And pin the other edge in place. And I'm going to go back over here. And I'm going to look at these little directions. I'm going to start from the bottom right, and I realize if you're left-handed it'll look a little different. And I'm going to thread my needle with some orange thread since my fabric is predominantly orange on the back side. And my thread was already cut because I had just sewed with this thread. If you need to cut it, you might have to cut it like at an angle.
I watch a lot of Star Wars.
And then I'm going to tie a knot on a single edge of the thread. Sorry, my knot didn't go good. Let me try again. I'm like trying to loop it in there 3 times, and now I'm going to trim that off. I'm going to go into the folded part. I'm looking at my picture. I'm going into the fold. And I'm going to grab a very small amount of my main outer fabric. And the trick is you want your stitches small. I'm going to go like about 3/8 of an inch through the fold. I'm just going to grab a small amount. I'm going to go across, and I'm going to do this all the way across the bottom of my fabric. Just catching a small amount.
So they just kept running down the stairs. And they ran over me. And I just kept falling down the stairs until my mom caught me.
And like I said, you just want your outer stitches to be small, and you want everything sort of uniform.
You need to turn it off and get home because it'll mess up like your Wi-Fi at home. But when you're out of place with Wi-Fi, no. So you have to go to the app.
And I think you kind of get the idea of sewing, but you're going to have to sew all the way across and tie a knot. And I'm just going to show you how I tie a knot. I take my thread. Okay, of course my thread came undone. It caught my Velcro here.
5 days. Kay McGowan. I saw him literally the other day.
Okay, I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to loop it around.
No, I didn't hear it.
So I've got 1 knot, 2 knots, and then you just put it in and trim it. But once again, you've got to sew all the way to the end. And that's it. Thank you.